Hi, I'm Artemis, and this is going to be the first video in a video series on picking color for a website. So today we're just going to make this. It's a simple click, set the color, the background color to a random color and put that color here. And now this is just going to cover color and background color. In later videos, we're going to cover CSS variables, gradients, and everything you need for picking colors for a website. Before finally, I'm going to show you how I actually pick colors for my own websites. So to start this, we're just going to need an HTML file with a link to our script, a link to a CSS file, the Jquery CDN, which will be in the description below if you need it, and that's going to be it. So what we're going to need first of all is an actual element to change the background color of, and we're just going to call that BG, and it's a div tag. And then we're just going to need somewhere we can actually put the hex color we generate. So we're just going to put that there. And this is going to be text color. Now that doesn't look pretty yet, but soon it will. So now what we want to do next is we want to go to our CSS file and we want to import a font. So I'm just going to put this in the link to the description below too. And this is a Google font. I will do a tutorial later showing you how to get Google fonts and import custom fonts into CSS to use on websites. Now this is just a preference thing, but I always just like to set margins and padding to 0 on all elements. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I would recommend it because we're going to be using visual units. More on that shortly. We're also going to set the font size to 48 pixels, as that is going to mean our text is bigger and easier to see. We're also going to make all our fonts bold. We're also going to make our make all our text bold. And we're also going to use that CSS, that font I imported up there earlier. So our font is called a Roboto. And we want the sans serif version. And we want to set the color of all text elements to white. Now, great, we can't see it. Next, we also want to do some styling in the background. So we're going to want to set display to flex. Now, flex is not that hard to learn. I will be doing a tutorial on it later. Then we want to use the items align property to center our text. And then we want to set the justify content property to center our text in the middle of the page. Now, justify content and align items are two attributes we can only use the display flex box for flex. So now I will do a tutorial on that later. However, if you don't want to wait, then there's a free CodeCamp tutorial you can look at. So next, we're also going to set the direction to column. Now we don't need to do that here, but column means that our items will be stacked on top of each other in a flex box, as compared to row where they'll be stacked beside each other. Now we're going to set the width to 100 visual width. I'm going to do a tutorial later on visual widths, which will come out soon. And we're also going to use 100 visual height. Now basically that means it's going to take up 100% of the available screen space. So it's similar to width 100%, but I just prefer it. So now that that's done, we're actually going to want to write a JS file. Now for those of you who haven't written JavaScript before, it's actually a pretty easy process to do. So because we're using jQuery, we need to put everything in the document ready function. Now this ensures that all our code fires after the document has loaded. And that means we're just going to avoid any simple errors, which are rather annoying to debug. So now that we've got that, we're going to need two functions. We're going to actually need a function to pick our color, or generate our hex value, I should say. And we're also going to need a function to actually set the color of the background and the value of our text element, which is right there. So first of all, we're going to generate the hex value. And we're just going to call that function pick color. Also, if you want this little live server here, check out my first HTML and CSS video, as that will show you how to get what the live server I'm using and how to use it. So we want our characters. Now hex values use the characters 0 through to 9 and A through to F. So we're just going to define that as an array. I know I've copy pasted it. It's very easy to type out. I just don't like typing out arrays. So now we're also going to want a count variable, and that's going to come soon. and we actually want our hex color. So this is the color we're actually going to return out from this function. And we're just going to want to set that to a hash, because all hex colors start with a hash. Now we're going to use a while loop, and this is where our count variable comes in. So we know that there's 6 values in a hex color, right? Or 3. We're going to use 6. So now that count is going to get us 6 colors once we actually increment count by 1. So now we're going to want to grab an index. This is for our characters array. And we're going to call math.floor. And now we're going to call math.random. And we're going to want to times that by our characters dot length. Now, this might seem like an elongated way to actually get a random number, but JavaScript is weird and generates random numbers off pi from memory. So I will go into that later in more detail if some of you want. And then we're just going to want to set count up by one. And then we actually want to add that index. We're going to want to add the character at that index to our hex color. So I'm going to go hex color plus equals characters, and then we want to just put index, as that will grab the character at the index and add it to our hex color. Then finally, we would just want to return the hex color. So now that we've got that function written, what we're going to do is we're going to use another function. I'm going to call it set colors, and that's actually going to set the background color and the value of this. So now we actually want to go bar color, and we want to go pick color. And now that whenever this function is called, whenever this function is called, it will call pick color function. Pick color will run, and then we'll return a hex color. So now it's some basic JavaScript. If you want to know more on JavaScript, I am considering doing a tutorial on it later, or jQuery. So now we want to get our BG element, which is our background. And then what we want to do is set its background color and what we want to do is set it to our color from our pick color function. Next, what we want to do is we want to actually go grab our text color from before, which is this element here. And we want to go set its text to color. Now, if we were to run our code now, you'll see nothing will happen. That's because we're not actually calling the set colors function. So first of all, I'm just going to show you this. So now you see we get our colors, but when we click, we get nothing. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go define another function. And now this function is going to be called, now this is an event listener. Now what's going to happen is whenever the click event occurs, it's going to change the background color and update this. So what we want to do is we want to grab our BG from before. And then what we want to do is .click. And this now is a JavaScript. Now this function is going to be called whenever we click this element. So whenever we click this, it's going to call this function. And now we're just going to simply update the color by doing set color, by calling our set colors function. So now, and that's it. That's basic. So now that's the first episode in my tutorial done. Next time, we're going to cover gradients, linear gradients to top, to bottom, etc. with gradients. We're also going to cover CSS variables and how we can interact with them with JavaScript. Thanks for watching.